So this will be our second part for Chapter 4, Violence and Magic. In this, I want to focus in a little bit more on violence. Girard makes a very important point on page 50 at the bottom, the last paragraph. Collective violence must therefore be recognized as a mechanism that is still creating myths in our universe, but for reasons we shall learn about, is functioning less and less well. So we'll talk about the same part. But what produces myth? Collective violence produces myth. Okay, and in the modern world, we not only have the decay of mythic forms, we also have almost the complete disappearance of the second transformation of the scapegoat of the victim into a god, into the source of all blessings. Okay, that is happening less and less for us. If you look at the historical text of persecution that we read in the first chapter from Guillaume de Machaut, and you compare it with the Dogger myth of the Native American Indians, you can see that there really are more or less the same distortions in each. The difference being that in the Dogger myth, the woman becomes the goddess protectress of the community. The element of the sacred is the big difference. Now, then Girard asks, given this, that there is this element of the sacred, are we trusting the myth too much if we see real victims and real scapegoats? Obviously, he does not think so. He thinks that people will make that criticism, but too great a distrust is as harmful as too great a trust. Now, the title of the chapter again is Violence and Magic, so let's talk some about magic. Ethnologists have recognized magic as a supernatural explanation of the causal type. In other words, you're looking for something happens, why did it happen? And instead of giving natural causes for it, we give some sort of supernatural cause. And then he points out to this interesting, kind of the way it divides. Some people want to stress the difference between science and magic. If you want to boast about the superiority of science, so modern science, of course, is much better than magic in explaining the causes of what happens. But if you want to stress the unity of human thought, that there are these connections between primitive archaic people and modern people, that there is this connection between magic as it was practiced, say, in alchemy versus modern chemistry, then you stress the similarity, the way people are looking for causes. Now, one of the great predecessors of René Girard in French-speaking world, in the world of anthropology, was Lévi-Strauss. And Lévi-Strauss tended to be at both camps. He wanted to stress the superiority of science. At the same time, he was really seeking to get at the unity of all human thought. So in one sense, you can look at magic as a science that's not yet born. In other words, it's sort of the precursor, the searching for causes. Or we can look at magical thought as a system of accusation. That is, magic assigns someone in the community with the evil eye that caused this particular bad event to happen at this particular time is one of the explanations. The reason that the granary falls over right as somebody is asleep beneath it is because of some person's evil influence, okay? And so Girard says that Evans Pritchard, who's a famous ethnologist, writes, magical thoughts seeks a significant cause on the level of social relations. And this is just critical because Evans Pritchard didn't see what he was saying. But when you're looking for a significant cause on the level of social relations, what you're saying is somebody out there caused this. there's something going on in the community. And so they're looking for a scapegoat. They're looking for someone to blame. And he points out the way we talk about a magical fashion of thinking, okay? Christian mobs who were persecuting the Jews, who would say that's this magical thought that somehow Jews are causing the plague, is also thinking in a mythological fashion, that they really are synonymous and both justified. And so he says on page 54, there is no essential difference between the representation and behavior of magic in history or in mythology. And there's the critical point. The text of persecutions really are the same as the text of mythology. Now, when we look at, and this is what he wants to get to, my last point, but, so to begin with the conclusion, he wants to point out to us the schizophrenic nature of our culture. That if we're historians reading text of persecution, we get all morally indignant about, look at these Christians who are anti-Semitic and persecuting Jews who had nothing to do with the plague. But with ethnologists, when we start looking at the myths, we're just sort of looking at, look at how they're trying to find a cause here. They're sort of searching for some sort of cause on a social level. And this is really the beginning of modern day science, in its very incipient stage. And we make no moral judgment about what's going on in the myth. And Girard wants to say, man, this is schizophrenic. These things are related. They're basically the same reality, and we need to look at them. So he says, myths represent persecution, the same persecutions as we see in text of persecution, but they are more difficult to decode because they contain greater distortion. So it becomes even more distortion. The victims become more monstrous. They become monsters, okay? They display fantastic power. And after sowing disorder, they reestablish the order and they become the founding gods. Well, we listen to that kind of thing. You have this monster becomes a god and things like that, and we think this cannot have anything to do with history. And Girard is trying to say, yes, it does. It's a founding myth of our culture. The return to peace and order is ascribed to the same cause as the earlier troubles, to the victim, him or herself. That is, the cause of the disorder, the cause of all our problems now becomes the cause of this return to peace. Okay? This makes the victim sacred. And this is where all culture starts from. So what Girard wants to point to is the relationship between myth, ritual, and taboo. And first of all, he says the whole process of what we've been talking about, okay, so this making the victim responsible for everything and then transforming the victim into the God being responsible for all the good things, this double transformation makes it a model for mythology, okay? It's the story we tell. It commemorates the appearance of this God, okay? It also becomes a model for ritual, okay? The experience of killing the victim helped us. It saved us from disaster. And therefore, we need to repeat this ritual, okay? And that's why all the evidence points to the beginning of culture being in human sacrifice. And eventually this human sacrifice gets replaced. So first of all, you're replacing the whole community getting killed by the one getting killed. Then you're going to replace the one getting killed by the animal getting killed. And eventually you might replace the animal with just an offering of fruits or vegetables. All these different replacements are possible. Finally, it is a counter model. So it's a model in a couple of different ways, but it's also a counter model for taboo. Don't do what the victim did, okay? And if you look at people like Eliade and these great writers on religion, what is religion? Religion is myth, ritual, taboo, all of which are rooted, according to Girard, in the victimage mechanism. To continue on, ethnologists saw this relationship between the myth and ritual, but they couldn't explain this model countermodel. They couldn't explain how it ties in with the ritual that both allows something and forbids something. And what he's saying is only violence can do that. And he points out, we get this difference between what we experience when we look from the outside and we see just some poor guy getting killed, right? And their experience of what actually happened. For them, it's this all-powerful being, the one who's really brought all of this disorder and all of the problems and everything is finally being overcome and conquered, and all of these blessings are flowing out from it. So the myth speaks of a God that dominates the community, and it doesn't lie. What we see, though, standing outside this is a mistreated human being. Thank you very much.